Hello, welcome to this masterclass on nature learning experiences for universal well-being. We will be talking about activating the naturalist spirit as a powerful way to discover the world and ourselves. How do you imagine we have discovered so many incredible things in the last century? Think of something in your life that has been your greatest discovery. How did it come about? What skills or attitudes helped you in this process? All discoveries start with questions that have been inspired by observation. Innovation and our inventive capacities are greatly inspired by nature and the magic of the interactions within it. My name is Luis Camargo. I have been working in nature-based education for over 25 years. I have been able to travel around the world, working with children and adults, reconnecting them to nature, and awakening the natural spirit within each of them. When I was young, I was lucky enough to have access to nature. I spent a lot of time by myself in nature. And in this time, the naturalist spirit awoke inside of me. It allowed me not only to see and learn about the world, but to see and learn about myself. And I want to share some of this with you. When was the last time you saw a bird's nest? How many offspring does that squirrel in the park have? Can you remember exactly where the sun rises in summer and winter, especially when looking out of your windows at home? Early explorers, scientists, and inventors all shared one key characteristic. They were keen and deep observers of the world around them. Observation was part of their daily life, and it allowed them to identify patterns, understand relationships, and create questions that led to innovation and discovery. Deep observation engages all the senses and uses intuition and insights to perceive the invisible relations between all things. When we read about and try to piece together the creative history of Galileo, Leonardo da Vinci, Charles Darwin, Alexander von Humboldt, Einstein, or Isaac Newton, we will realize that none of them were specialists as we have nowadays. Of course, they had a specialty upon which they focused their work, but they were also generalists who had activated what I call the naturalist spirit. Their broad knowledge and capacity for deep observation resulted in the question which became the motivating drive behind their quest for discovery. In this way, great discoveries such as gravity, electricity, and the theory of evolution and ecosystem dynamics were made part of our knowledge. By contrast, learning in most of our school systems has become increasingly mechanistic and focused on specific subject areas and skills, such as language, math, technology, art, and science. Each of these areas is fundamental for our development, but this approach misses the critical ingredient allowing us to understand life systems, interrelations, and interdependencies. We live in a planet in which all living beings are interrelated and interdependent. This means that beginning with the most basic of interactions, such as breathing or eating, we are sharing a common ground. We are all connected, and our well-being is too. Many environmental and social issues today have a common root, and I believe that common birthplace lies in the way we build relationships, how we understand them, and how we are able to recognize them. Yet, modern learning systems do not focus on relationships, but on learning about subjects. If we shift learning to observe, identify, and understand, and build upon harmonizing relationships, we will be able to walk in the path of holistic well-being. We are defining holistic well-being as the well-being that interweaves the well-being of self, of others and society, and of nature into an integral concept of well-being. The holistic approach means that the three aspects are interconnected and interdependent too. Harmonizing and balancing relationships and interactions within each aspect and between the three levels is what makes this truly holistic. An individual whose only focus is on personal well being and neglects the relationships and effects it has in society and planetary well being will be limited only by partially developing his well being potential. More so, personal well being cannot fully be realized unless all aspects are included. So, what is the naturalist spirit that I spoke of earlier? That attitude of discovery embodied by all those great minds? And where did it come from? Well, in the early 1400s, the word naturen emerges in English to describe natural philosopher or scientist. In the 1500s, French started using naturalist to refer to the one who studies the natural rather than the spiritual things. A naturalist, in essence, is someone who is keen to observe and study nature around them, its behaviors and characteristics. The naturalist mindset, or naturalist spirit, as I like to call it, is an attitude for learning that allows us to use deep observation and contact with nature to understand the world, especially how relationships and energy flows shape our reality. In 1983, Howard Gardner presented his theory of multiple intelligences, which proposes that all human beings have multiple ways of processing information about the world. These include verbal, linguistic, logical, visual, musical, bodily, kinesthetic, interpersonal, and intrapersonal. A couple of years later, he presented these seven intelligences. He added two more, the naturalist intelligence and the existentialist intelligence. Since then, he has mentioned other possible additions, such as moral and teaching intelligence. His theory of multiple intelligences aimed to understand how each individual decodes the world around them. We can see in our own lives that some people we know are better in certain things than in others. But nonetheless, all people have all intelligences, Gardner described, and they all come together to form the holistic concept of human intelligence. Even though there are debates regarding Gardner's proposition, I believe it opens a window to the complexities of human understanding and how we process our surroundings. It is very interesting to see how the naturalist intelligence is included as the capacity to understand and differentiate different plants, ecosystems, and weather patterns occurring in nature, skills for which the naturalist spirit is used. So, can the naturalist spirit be applied to learning beyond observing natural phenomena? And if so, how can we do that? Several abilities and skills have been described to be critical for a naturalist. I guess if we can apply these skills to all the other types of learning and learning experiences, we will be able to apply the naturalist spirit to everything we do in life to learn. The first and most useful is observation. An individual whose observation has been awakened is attentive and aware of what is being perceived. Observation, combined with the second ability, sensory awareness, allows us to see not only with our eyes, but using all our senses. It allows an individual to start identifying combinations occurring commonly in what you see, hear, smell, and even taste or feel, your intuition, and start recognizing the invisible connections and patterns occurring at different levels between different things. As patterns are recognized, interconnections and interdependencies become evident, especially how we as individuals, as human beings, as mammals, are connected, and empathy starts emerging with the world. A naturalist spends much time during observation in silence and outside in nature. This helps to develop another skill, mental clarity and critical thinking, which in turn stimulates curiosity and the investigative ability, or the capacity to ask good questions to help resolve, understand, and explain what has been discovered. Time in nature and deep observation allows for an increase in appreciation and respect for nature. A really important part of developing this intelligence is related to the way we record and process our observations. All famous naturalists were expert communicators in the written language, as writers or poets, or in the arts, as illustrators or painters. These skills were developed in order to document in journals the observations, thoughts, and questions deriving from the process. Many use these forms of art to express the love, magic, or concerns deriving from their discoveries. This can be illustrated in an example from Roundglass Sustain of botanical and wildlife artist Purna Gupta telling us her secret for discovering the natural world around us.
I started nature journaling almost 3 years ago when I developed an interest in bird watching. What began as a way of remembering the names of the many birds I saw soon developed into a deeper passion. So these are all specimens that I've collected from a pomegranate tree close to where I live. And whenever I'm drawing in my nature journal and illustrating a tree, a good place to begin for me is drawing the individual parts of the plant. Note down your observations about the texture of the leaf. Soft, shiny, whatever things come to your mind. I'm just going to draw this baby pomegranate. So, for example, I can see that the leaf is a darker color, and I will just make swatches of it here. So here, when I make a color swatch, what I just try to note down with this is all the colors that I can see in the plant in a particular time. So this is the leaf, this is the flower, and this is the unripe fruit. It's a great idea to observe a branch of the plant and try to ask these questions, whether there's a pattern to the way leaves are growing. Do the pomegranate always grow at the end of a branch? So now what I also like to do is, when I'm making this timeline, to note down in what time all of this has progressed. So for example, I saw this flower on April 1. Then around 5th April, I saw that the flower had shed its leaves. Around 10 April, I see that it is starting to fatten up, and at this stage, now the question is, so the idea of a nature journal is not only to chronicle what you see and observe, but it is also to ask questions. Do not forget to have a little bit of fun. Note down any feelings that you've had, any memories, or any associations that you have with this particular tree.
Research has shown that in younger children who are allowed to explore nature and develop the naturalist spirit, have an increase in the development of appreciation of life, nature, and empathy, as well as social emotional skills. When we speak of holistic well being, we are connecting well being in the three dimensions: personal well being, societal well being, and planetary well being. In other words, we are working to ensure the well being of the self, others, and nature. Since the three dimensions are interconnected, the lack of well being in one affects the capacity for well being in the other two. As we develop our naturalist spirit, we can start recognizing patterns and states of well being, not only in nature, but also in the relationship that exists between all life forms and within ourselves. Krishnamurti, who was a famous Indian philosopher and spiritual teacher, used to speak of the capacity to be the observer and the observed simultaneously in order to acquire self knowledge and understanding that could help develop the inner self and set it free from the confines of what we already know. I find that by doing this within ourselves, by observing and being observed, we are actually activating the naturalist spirit to that perspective, the self. As Krishnamurti mentioned, doing this without prejudice or fixed preconception is the key to being able to learn. This principle of unbiased, objective observation can be applied to all types of learning. Activating the naturalist spirit and reducing the prejudice of our observations increases our ability and capacity to learn, to discover, and to innovate, to become better in our relationships with ourselves, others, and nature. In our educational systems, there is no limit to how these principles can be incorporated to benefit the learning process across subjects. Starting with the observation of nature, of communities, or starting with the observation of the self, we can learn to see in a different way. We can start to enable individuals to see the relationship between aspects that define peace or conflict, regeneration or degeneration in relations, and the factors that are involved in each. By learning through the understanding of relationships, students build their capacity for systemic thinking and understanding. Project, inquiry, and nature-based learning become pathways to stimulate the naturalist intelligence of students anywhere. So how do we develop a naturalist spirit or mindset? First, we have to start with ourselves as teachers or parents so we can effectively mentor and inspire children to do the same. We need to fall in love with nature. In order to do this, we need to spend time deeply observing nature. It can be by yourselves or with your students or children. It can be indoors. It can be from the window or in your backyard. Or ideally, it would be outside, surrounded, immersed by nature. Using engaging questions to direct attention, focus on the most minute magical details. With younger children, build creative stories starting with what you are seeing. Reflect on the experience and observations associated with the self, with the community, or with the natural world. Open the door to start connecting with a holistic perspective. Start a journal of discovery and build the habit to document observations. In the process, you can facilitate developing other skills, such as drawing and painting techniques, as well as free writing and lettered expression. Stimulate the capacity to describe with details what is being observed and communicate it with others. Finally, look for and try to identify connections between the objects or subjects of observation. Identify relationships and interactions, create hypotheses and questions that generate new questions and help explore new angles. In the words of the English poet William Wordsworth, the tables turned. Up, up, my friend, and quit your books, or surely you'll grow double. Up, my friend, and clear your looks. Why all this toil and trouble? The sun above, the mountains ahead, a freshening luster mellow. Through all the long green fields has spread his first sweet evening yellow. Books, 'tis a dull and endless strife. Come hear the woodland linnet, how sweet his music on my life. There's more wisdom in it. And hark, how blithe the throstle sings. He too is no mean preacher. Come forth into the light of things. Let nature be your teacher. She has a world of ready wealth, our minds and hearts to bless. Spontaneous wisdom breathed by health, truth breathed by cheerfulness. One impulse from a vernal wood may teach you more of man, of moral evil and of good, than all the sages can. Sweet is the lore which nature brings, our meddling intellect. Misshape the beauteous forms of things we murder to dissect. Enough of science and of art. Close up those barren leaves and come forth. Bring with you a heart that watches and receives. With this, I want to invite you to awaken your natural spirit and incorporate in your classroom, in your home, the naturalist approach to discovery. Bring children and students out into nature and help them observe deeply into nature. I am sure that when they discover the magic in nature, they realize that the magic in nature is also within themselves. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon.